Amen. Well, we're going to get into Psalm 4 tonight, and I am sorry for the confusion. I noticed my typo after I had printed everything. It was one typo. Really messed it up for me. So if you have the stapled paper, I gave it out on Sunday. It says, believe the truth, reject the lie. Everything is correct except for one very, very essential detail on the second page. The top of the second page says, verse by verse, and it says Psalm 3. Should say Psalm 4. So everything else is correct except for that one annoying detail. And so that is like the crucial detail too, because it's telling you exactly which psalm to look at. Now let me explain why I made that mistake, because it actually does play into the explanation of tonight. And in our study, and we've looked at this over the last few weeks, is we're looking at Psalms, and Psalms is arranged in this thematic way. So if you remember, Psalm 1 is all about the blessings that you get. And so Psalm 1 is about the blessings that you get for following the Lord. And then Psalm 2 is the idea of you better kiss the sun while you can. And it's the idea of there's all these people who lift themselves up against God and fight against God. What on earth are you doing? Like you're really setting yourself up for trouble. And so that's Psalm 1 and 2. Those are kind of the introductory Psalms. Then we get into Psalms 3 through 5, which is why all of that stuff at the top kept talking about Psalm 3 through 5. Psalm 3 through 5 are all based on the story of Absalom. So that's why you see there. Psalm 7 is also based on the story of Absalom. So there's a narrative that's being built here. And so I want you to see this because, again, we covered Psalm 3 last week. And it's the idea of David taking responsibility for some of his own actions. He's looking at what God's doing. He's looking at what these wicked men are doing. And so Psalm 3 just kind of runs into that, the idea of David going, man, I'm in trouble. Like, everybody is against me, and I'm in a dire strait, and I'm going through the ringer, and David is going, how are they increase that trouble me? And that's what Psalm 3 is all about. And what Psalm 3 is doing is David is encouraging himself in the Lord. And I hope you know that this is not just an intellectual exercise. All right? I can't tell you how encouraging Psalms has been to me lately. It's just one of those things that, like, it's been the gut check where God's like, do you really trust me? Like, do you really, really trust me? How much do you really trust me? And it's been one of those things that God has just kind of repeatedly hit to say, listen, this is my area. I'm in control of this. Are you going to delight yourself in me? And there's so much of this that comes back. And you'll see here, Psalm 3, David is facing all sorts of opposition. And he says, many are they which say of my soul, there's no help of him in God. And he just goes through, and we looked at that all last week, where David is going through just the absolute worst imaginable time you cannot fathom what David is going through here. Maybe bits of it you've gone through where you're like, yes, I could see where a family member's betrayed me here, and someone's hijacked my ministry here, or destroyed my, there's all these aspects that we could go through. But David, he has children killing each other, and children rising up against him, and people coming up with things that he had done years earlier, now throwing it back in his face. At the same time that people are finally using that opportunity to get vengeance on him for things that he's done. I mean, it's all of this happening at the same time. And so David in Psalm 3 is really, really trying to remind himself, hey, I serve the Lord. I've got to trust in him. And he is going to be the one that protects me. He is going to be the one that upholds me. He is going to be the one that saves me. And you'll notice, I love this verse. And again, I know we're in Psalm 4, but I want you to see Psalm 3. Psalm 3, verse 7, arise, O Lord, save me, my God. And you get this idea where David is coming and saying, Lord, it's like you're asleep. And it's like I'm waiting for you to act, but you're slumbering. And I know you don't. But figuratively speaking, Lord, if you could wake up and help me right now, I really appreciate it. And remember, David is running out of the kingdom. Like he's fleeing, and this is all happening. Okay? Now, not to overwhelm you with stuff, but Psalm 7 is also tied into this whole event. So Psalm 3, 4, and 5, you skip 6 for some reason, and you go to 7. These are all about Absalom and the rebellion. Specifically, Psalm 7 is where David is on the run and one of Saul's relatives shows up on the hillside and says, you're a bloody man, you're a murderer, you're getting what you got and you deserve it, and he's throwing rocks at him, and David is like, I'm innocent of this. And we're going to look at that, but I want you to understand that this is the beauty of Psalms, because what David is doing is he's saying, I'm innocent in that I've already dealt with the judge on that one. Like, that court case has been done, that trial's been had. I'm not guilty of that anymore. Because really, if you look at some of the things Shimei was accusing him of, David was a murderer. David was a bloody man. David had done those things. But God had already passed judgment. God had already taken care of that. So now David was no longer holding that guilt because God had already taken care of it. And I think that's the beautiful thing to remember is when God has forgiven something, you don't then have to continue walking around with that looming over your head going, oh man, I did this thing in my past. No, if it's under the blood, it's under the blood. You don't have to keep bringing it back up. It's paid for. And that's where David can say in Psalm 7, if I have lifted my foot against someone who is at peace with me, if I have murdered someone without cause, then I hope I die. And if you stop and think about what he did to Uriah and what he did to Bathsheba and what he did, you're like, but David, you did. But he could say, that one was already judged. That one was already taken care of. In fact, I am living out the judgment on that right now. I do not have to keep rehashing that. And so these are the things that I want us to keep in mind, because you'll notice the title of this study is You Need to Believe the Truth and Reject the Lie, which means there is such a thing as truth that we need to hold on to, and there are things that are going to creep into our head that are lies that we need to straight up reject. So let's walk through this, all right? So we are here, and let's kind of go back and forth on this one a little bit. What do you think are some of the lies that David is being told through the situation with Absalom? Like, what are some lies that are being told to David? You see it there at the top of your sheet. It says, what are a number of the lies that David's being told here? Let's just kind of throw it out. What do you think? What are some of the lies that people are saying or that David might be saying about himself as he's on the run? Martha?
That they've taken his kingdom.
Okay, so basically, if you want to imagine it, all is lost, all right? So they've taken my kingdom, all is lost, okay? So I don't know if you've ever been through one of those dark times and you've gotten to this point where you're like, yep, we're done. Pack it up. All's lost. I mean, David is quite literally up to his eyeballs in this one right now. All is lost. Okay? What's another lie that David could be either hearing or telling himself? What do you think, Martha?
His son Absalom, he thought that he was going to be safe if he stayed in that building. He called himself protecting him.
Okay, so Absalom is lying, but I want to focus primarily on David. So what are some of the things that are going through David's head? Like, as you study out this whole situation with Absalom, someone other than Martha. Mike.
That David either still has friends that support him, or that the friends that he thinks he has don't support him.
Yeah, so he's suffering betrayal on all sides. So he's got friends that have turned on him. He's got people who haven't turned on him but are being said to have turned on him. And so David is in the middle of all this going, I don't know who to trust. There's no one I can turn to. Everybody's betrayed me. So it's kind of all is lost, but it's on a very, very personal level. All right, what else? What else do you think? Like, what are some of the other lies that are cropping up?
That your family's all going to be killed.
Okay.
If everything's overthrown, then you're going to lose your family. The ones he's trying to hide and protect.
So yeah, my family's doomed. Like, it's hopeless. They're done. Like, your actions got your whole family killed. Because quite literally, if you think, how many members of his family have either been killed or are on the verge? You know, Solomon's probably a little kid running, and Amnon's already dead, and Absalom, he just took over the kingdom, so most likely one of them is going to die as a result of, so David is going through all of that, okay? What else? Martha?
He's probably thinking he's going to marry his wife, marry David's wife.
Okay, So I'm not sure how much David knew about that one, but there was a prophecy that there's a lot of violation that's going to be done. And so Nathan, the prophet, has basically said to David, the sword will not leave your family, and there's going to be a lot of other things that are kind of a recompense for the sin that you've done. And David is now facing that fact, knowing those things are probably going to happen. And again, part of this would be Absalom trying to secure his spot as king by taking all the king's wives and saying, they're my wives now. And so there's just a lot of sordid stuff going on here. You can see some of the other lies. Take a look at the last page here. I kind of listed out for you, but I want you to think this through, because some of these same lies are the ones that are going to crop up on us. So you see here, all Israel follows Absalom. So 2 Samuel 15 bears that out. And basically, David is on the run because he is told Absalom, because really, what did Absalom do? Absalom showed up at the door of the city and said, oh, that I were judge, I would listen to all of your complaints. I would do this the right way. And so Absalom, it says, stole the hearts of the people. And so now David is on the run because he didn't take care of that. He's on the run, and for his knowledge, all of Israel's following Absalom. Okay, so that's one of the lies. Also, you see in 2 Samuel 16, this is a lie of a lie, so it's not even a true lie, if that makes sense. But it was Mephibosheth is plotting against you. And so this one is weird because it's actually not even true, but it just adds to that betrayal because David did good by Mephibosheth. He was kind to him. He had nothing to gain from being nice to Mephibosheth other than just keeping his promise. And now he's told, hey, he turned on you too. And so David, now again, you got to think, David's on the run, and now you got Shimei showing up on the hillside, one of Saul's relatives, saying, you're a bloody man, you overthrew Saul, and now you're getting overthrown. You reap what you sow, you jerk. I mean, that's basically what's going on. And he's also got the sting of Mephibosheth betraying him in the back of his mind too, who was another relative of Saul. So David is now sitting here going, so every member of Saul's family that I left alive is now coming for my blood. And so you've got this, again, it's the heat of the moment, it's the fog of war. Also, Shimei is going to tell him you're a murderer. And so in 2 Samuel 16, if you want to hold your place here, I do want to see this because this is going to come into play later on. But in 2 Samuel, look at 2 Samuel 16. 2 Samuel 16, and look at verse 7. And it says, and thus said Shimei when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. All right, and so what he's doing is he's basically saying, David, you pretend to serve God, but you don't really. You're an evil, wicked man. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hands of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. And David is so defeated at this point that he's just running. Like I don't know if you've ever been there where you've just been so beaten down by everything going on that you're like, I just can't even. Like I can't even muster up the fight to do anything. And that's how David is. Abishai is one of his soldiers here. Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why does this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. So here you got this guy on the hillside chucking rocks at David, and David is just going, I just don't even know. And look what David said. The king said, what have I to do with thee, ye sons of Zeruiah? Let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, curse David. Who shall then say, wherefore dost thou then curse? So he's basically recognizing that God allowed this to happen. God had Shimei there. Shimei did the thing. God didn't have him trip on the way to do this. Obviously, he's not saying this is a good thing to do to a king. But he's just going, listen, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And he's just and says, David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth out of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now this Benjamite do it? Let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. And so he's at this point where he goes, dude, my own son is trying to kill me. Do you think anyone else really bothers me? Like my own flesh and blood is hunting me to death. I really don't care what a son of Saul has to think about me right now. But you can see kind of how beaten down he is. He's still doing the right thing. And he says, it may be that the Lord will look upon my affliction and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. And David and his men went by the way, and Shimei went along the hillside over against him and cursed as he went and threw stones and cast dust. And the king and all the people that were with came weary and refreshed himself there. And so again, David is getting his past hurled in his face. Now, he didn't do anything to Saul. In fact, everything David did was right by Saul. In fact, he cut off the hem of his robe and felt guilty about it and tried to make things right. Like David did right by Saul every single way you possibly could. So David is innocent, but this is the nature of it. You might do completely right by someone, they will still find a way to hate you. That's what this is talking about. And so what David is doing is David is now suffering, and so again, he's being a murderer. In 2 Samuel 15, you can read it on your own time, Absalom basically questions David's qualifications for the job. That's basically what he does. He says, oh, I wish I were king. I would do such a better job. Now, David's in the middle of a revolution, so obviously that's where it went. But again, if you've ever been in a job and you've had someone come and insult you, and you're like, I was just doing my best. Like, I was just doing what I knew how to do. And it's like, well, your best isn't good enough. You're terrible at this. And it's like, that wasn't my fault. And that's what David, so David's hitting with all these at the same time. He also probably is a bit self-loathing. If you look in 2 Samuel 12, you'll see that Nathan laid it out and said, David, this is the stuff that's going to come because of your sin. These are the consequences for your sin. And David is now living with those consequences going, I did bring this on myself. Like, I had the sin with Bathsheba. Probably that sin with Bathsheba led him not to take care of the Amnon and Tamar situation, which then had Absalom take care of it, which then he didn't take care of the Absalom situation, which then led to the exile, and he didn't deal with that, which led to him coming back, and he didn't deal with that, and so David really could look at a lot of these events and go, a lot of these are on my back. Now, they're forgiven. They're under the blood. I've repented of them, but there's still things in my past that still come up and haunt me. And so you can imagine David has no shortage of things running through his head. But I want you to notice this because, again, if you turn the page back over to the verse-by-verse walkthrough, David has all these lies being yelled at him, probably internally. There's all these lies being said around David. And in fact, we get a hint at some of the lies by the way he writes this psalm. And so let's read it. David is crying out to the Lord, and I want you to see this, because again, this is while he's on the run from Absalom. So somewhere in this mix that we just read, David is writing this psalm. He's composing this song. And it says this, Hear me when I call, O God, my righteousness. That's a really powerful thing to start off with, because look what he's saying. He's saying, I am not my own righteousness. Basically, you're right, I'm not good enough. You're right, I'm not holy enough. You're right, I'm a sinner. You're right, I'm wicked. You're right. But look what he does. He says, Lord, you are my righteousness. So I mean, you take that even to us as Christians. We do not stand redeemed by our own righteousness. We are not justified by our own righteousness. We're justified because he took it and then gave us his righteousness in exchange. And that's where David is. He says, hear me when I call, O God, my righteousness. I'm not worthy to talk to you. I'm not godly enough to talk to you. But you're godly enough to talk to you, and you are my righteousness. And I want you to notice that, because what David is doing is he's saying, Lord, these are things you've done for me. Now you'll notice I put in parentheses there the thing that I want you to start thinking of from now on. It's not, God, what have you done for me lately? It's, God, what have you done for me? Period. Full stop. Because I think a lot of times we all fall into this trap. Lord, what have you done for me lately? That was the problem with the children of Israel. They kept coming back to, what have you done for me lately? And he's like, well, I've given you manna, and I brought water out of a rock, and I rescued you from Egypt across the Red Sea. Also, you remember the 10 plagues. It's like, yeah, but that was like 2 weeks ago. Oh, yeah, that was like 12 weeks ago. Oh, that was like 10 years ago. You know, and what it was is that wasn't good enough. They had to keep getting more and more and more. It was never enough that God had broken the back of Egypt and split a river and split a rock and done all the, like, no, that wasn't enough. You've got to do something else, God. You know, it's like a little kid, you know, they're like, ooh, again. And you you do the thing and they're like, again. And you do the thing and they're like, again. And you're like, no, like I'm done. And they're like, you hate me. And it's like, don't treat God like that, because what David is doing is he's not saying, what have you done for me lately? He's saying, Lord, you are my righteousness. You've enlarged me. I mean, I love that. He says, Lord, you have enlarged me in my distress. Now, again, you think of all people, David right now could go, no. I feel very straitened. I feel very narrowed. I feel oppressed. But David goes, no. Lord, you brought me out of a sheepfold and you gave me a kingdom. You brought me out of nothing and you gave me a family. Lord, you brought me, I was the most miserable of my family and you made me the most powerful man in the land. You haven't done wrong by me. You know, it's like Job who says, you know what, hey, I came into this world naked and I'm going to go out wearing the same outfit. Like, blessed be the name of the Lord. Because he recognized it all came from God. God can take it away at a moment. So be it. We serve him. And that's the beauty of this. You can see why this is very encouraging to me lately. And he says, oh, Lord, you're my righteousness. You've enlarged me in my distress. And then he says this, have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. And David is saying, like, I am not getting the full amount I deserve. Like, you've actually held your hand back. Like, I deserve death for the things I've done, and you didn't give it to me. You let me live. And David's going to do that. Like in Psalm 6, he's going to say, Lord, like, let me live because I can't glorify you when I'm dead. And that's going to be part of Psalm 6, spoiler alert. And that's where he's going to go. But I want you to notice that David is recognizing his righteousness comes from the Lord. His enlargement comes from the Lord. The mercy comes from the Lord. But also he's saying, you hear my prayers. Right. Like you actually take the time to listen. And so I want you to unpack that, because it's not, you're not listening to me now. David goes, oh, I know you listen. You're just choosing not to act quickly right now. I'm in a bad spot, admittedly. I've got people betraying me. All really does seem lost. But you know what? You gave it to me in the first place. If it's all lost, it's because you took it back. This betrayal, I deserve it. I mean, I look at the things I did that you forgave me for. You know what? These people didn't forgive me for it. So, yeah, but God, you've been kinder than I deserve. And you can see that high idea, family's doomed. It's not. I know that I'm going to have a kingdom that goes on beyond this. I know my family's not really doomed. But we can get in that spot where we really do just kind of death spiral. And we just kind of get into that doom and gloom, and it's like, no, stop. Remind yourself of the truth. And that's why David starts off Psalm 4 with, let's look at all the things God promised and all the things God's done. Then he switches over and says, Lord, I want you to hear what they're saying, though. And it's almost like he pulls out a tape recorder. He says, God, do you realize what they're saying about me right now? And look what he says. So first he says, Lord, you hear when I call, but I want you to know what these other sons of men are saying. And he says, oh, you sons of men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? And so he's basically saying, like, Lord, you've honored me. You've enlarged my border. These men, they've taken all of that you gave me, and they've turned it to my shame. And then he goes, they love empty things. They love things that don't matter. Lord, I'm trying to love things that do. And so these people are going after vanity. They're going after those empty things that don't matter. So Lord, they're saying this stuff about me. They're living in a way that doesn't match what they should be. And then this word leasing is this idea of lying. So they're going after lying ways. They're going after, that's why I titled this, You've Got to Believe the Truth. Because these people, and you'll see that leasing come up again in Psalm 5, because again, they're coming and they're telling lies. And I don't know if you've run into this type of person who can tell a lie with a straight face and extreme confidence. They're called politicians. But they tell it just super confidently, and you're like, but that's not even true. And it's like, but I said it with a straight face, so it is true. And you're like, it's still not. Nothing of what you just said is true. But we have people who they will just tell a bold-faced lie, and you're like, you almost convinced me because of how confident you were and how you said that. And that's what David is running into. These are empty men who are lying about me. They're saying these things that aren't right. And Lord, I got to make sure I don't believe them. Shimei is up there on the hillside telling me I'm a murderer. I mean, I am. But we already dealt with that. So I'm innocent. And that's this thing. So you'll see David repeatedly saying things like, Lord, will you step back into the judgment seat and judge for me? Because I kind of feel like you're not, and I really need the help right now. Okay? And so that's what you've got going on. Now, then he hits with a Selah. And I did remember to put it in the notes this week. All right? And so you see there, that end of verse 2 is that Selah. Anybody remember what that Selah was all about? Pause. Yeah, it was a pause, like a musical note, like a rest or something. It basically was there to say, stop, think about what was just said. And so if we did, we don't have a whole lot of time to stop. God is truth. Let every man be a liar. And that truth, if we can meditate on it, is going to revolutionize our spiritual walk. It's going to cure that discouragement. It's going to stop us in our tracks because there's so much, and again, I don't know if you've counseled with people before or you've started talking to people who are struggling with something, and it's just a rapid fire of all the bad going on in their life and how worthless they are and this. And sometimes you've got to kind of just stop it in its tracks, derail it completely and say, hold on, stop. Like you're quite literally spiraling out of, and some people I talk to them and it's like, this bad thing could happen and this bad thing could happen. We never know if this, and it's like, stop. Just stop. And David really is, he's starting off, let's meditate on who God is, what God has said, what God has done. Let's really dig in. Men don't really matter. Stop and think about that. And that's where he ends. Then he gets into the second phase of the psalm. And he says this, but know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Now again, this is David. This is David who killed a man, who took the man's wife, who neglected some of his duties. Like David is not a man that you would look at and go, yeah, he's like this super innocent, whitewashed dude that never did anything wrong. But he's already dealt with those sins. They are covered by God. He's already dealt with it. He doesn't have to keep bringing it back up. It's like Paul, who can say, I did those things in unbelief, I've repented, and now I'm no longer that man. And Paul will look at the church like Corinthians, and he says, all of these sins will keep you out of heaven, but that's what you were. You're not that way anymore. And I think that's a beauty because there's a lot of times where we keep bringing up our past, and we keep reminding God of what our past is. And he's like, oh, I know, I was there. Yeah, remember when you said, I'm sorry, and you asked for forgiveness, and I gave it to you? I've separated your sins as far as the east is from the west. I don't know if you've ever stopped and thought of that illustration when God said he separates it as the east is from the west. If you look at a globe, the east and the west never meet. They don't. Like you keep going west, and it's just keeps going. Now, north and south, like you go north, and you eventually come back around, and you're going south again once you hit the North Pole. But there's no, like, east pole. There's no east pole that you hit, and now suddenly you're going west. No, like, you always keep going this. I think I'm actually moving. Anyway, it all depends on which angle you're looking at me. But the idea that God says, I've separated your sins as far as the east is from the west. I've thrown them in the depths of the deepest sea. His point is, yeah, of course you did those things. But I took, and we paid for them, and I threw them out. Stop digging through the trash. Like, that's a bad form of dumpster diving. And so David could quite literally come and say, I am a godly man. I am a man who is seeking after the things of God. No matter what I've done, I am a man who is seeking after the things of God. I am a godly man because you are my righteousness. Not because I am my righteousness, because you are. And then he says, you will hear when I call. And then you'll notice he says this, stand in awe of God for what he's done. And I think this is where, when we do, spiritual dumpster diving, so to speak, and we're pulling all of our sins back out of the trash, we're not standing in awe of what God has done. We're reveling in the wickedness that we have done, and we're bringing it back up because for some reason we find our identity in those things that God has already paid for. And David, in this psalm, is saying, they're paid for. That's not who I am. They're done. And so I just want us to meditate on that because, again, he's saying, Lord, you have set apart, that's what the word sanctifies means. You have set apart those who follow you, and you listen to them who follow you. And then he goes further, and he says this, be in awe of him, verse 4. He says, stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Again, if you've talked to someone or if you've been that someone who keeps rehashing the past, this is what you need to be told. Be still. Because what happens when you start digging up the past? It really is that. It's like stirring up the bottom of a pond. It just keeps stirring up, and you're just muddying the waters, and it's like, stop. Be still. Know that he is God, and let his forgiveness actually be forgiveness. And what David is doing is he is saying, I can sleep. I can meditate on the goodness of God. I don't have to keep rehashing the badness. All right, and then look, he says it one more time. He says, Selah. Stop and think about that. So David in the first section has said, God is so good. Look at all the great things God has done. Look at what these bad people are saying about me. I'm not going to listen to him. Stop and think about it. God's going to listen to me because he listens to godly men, and I'm a godly man. Not because I'm a good person, but because the righteousness has been applied to me. Stop and think about that. And then we get into the last little section here, and you'll notice verse 5. Okay, because God has been so good, and because God has been so kind, and because God has been so merciful, offer the sacrifices of righteousness. Live in a way that pleases him. Live in a way that brings honor to him. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness. Put your trust in the Lord. There be many that say. So he's going to come back one more time in this final section and go, yeah, there's all these people who are still doing the talk. There's many people who say, who will show us any good? Well, Lord, you lift up the light of your countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart more than in the time when their corn and their wine has increased. So if you've ever gone on like a really, really nice vacation, and you have that relaxation and that you're like, you know what, this was just really, really nice. You know, I went on a vacation one time, and there was like this spa hot tub thing in the room, and I was just like, this is awesome. And I just sat there for like hours. I was like, this is wonderful. Like literally, this is vacation to me. I'm just sitting, all right? And that was great. It was like, that's all I ever wanted. David is comparing to say, look, when God is for you and when God is your blessing, he puts that gladness in your heart that's better than chilling out in that hot tub. Like he's saying, their corn, their wine, like those wonderful necessities, those wonderful things, like when all that you could have is just flourishing, he goes, no. Having God, and again, this is David. He's a king. He had it all. And he could go, I've had it all. I'm telling you, nothing compares to the gladness that God gives. And then he says, verse 8, now again, I put you back in mind of the context. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. And he says, why? Because thou, Lord, you're the only one who can let me dwell in safety. And if we divorce this psalm from its context, this verse doesn't make any sense and doesn't provide any comfort. But if you know that David is on the run from Absalom, and David could die at any moment, and his son is actively trying to kill him, and David goes, God's got me. God's my salvation. God's my shield. And I want you to notice this, because look at how Psalm 3 ends. Psalm 3 ends with, arise, O Lord, save me, my God, for thou hast smitten all my enemies on the cheekbone. He's in the middle of running away from his enemies, and he's saying, it's as good as done. Psalm 4, same context, says, Lord, I'm going to go to sleep tonight because I know you're going to protect me, because I'm right with you, so I know you've got my back. And it's not an entitlement. It's him going, Lord, if I was guilty, you would have already killed me. And then look at how Psalm 5 ends. Verse 12, for thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous, and thy favor thou wilt compass about with a shield. So you notice how each one of these Psalms ends with David going, Lord, you're my protection. You're my provision. You know, Jehovah Jireh, if you will. And so I just want you to take some time. Again, I've added a few things to the notes just beyond what I taught, because I hope this is helpful to you. I hope this is something you can take and meditate on. Work your way through some of the questions. I realize I spoiled some of the questions by showing you that I put the answers on the back so you can check your own homework. Anyway, let's open it up for questions and comments, because again, I think this is going to be something that we just need to meditate on. We need to make aware and dwell on this. Believe the truth, reject the lie. All right, questions or comments tonight?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find your scripture. Thank you, Brother David. It's a scripture here verse 5, Psalm 4:5. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. That reminds me of Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord.
Yeah, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not on thine own understanding.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got to think, like, who did Solomon probably learn some of these proverbs from?
His dad.
Probably his dad.
Yeah.
So Solomon did a ton of research. He got proverbs from all over the world. But I imagine some of these illustrations Solomon is using is probably straight out of his dad's life as his dad's sitting there and talking to him. And so you'll see some really interesting parallels between Psalms and Proverbs.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
One thing, when you were sharing that about the lies David was told and was believing, I was thinking, but also the truth, David was told by God way back when he was a young man, you are going to be king.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew no matter what anyone said or tried to take away his kingdom, God is the one who gave it to him. So
Yeah.
he could rest and encourage himself in that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's important to remember because, yeah, there's not as clear, prophecies, so to speak, with our lives, but there are things where God says, hey, I will protect you, I will provide your needs. If you do these things, this is what I promise. David, he could take it to the bank. I mean, he had it where it said, your son will sit on the throne. So David's sitting there going, I'm pretty sure that doesn't apply to Absalom. I'm pretty sure that's not how God designed this to go down. Now, maybe if he did, okay. But David has some of those assurances, but he also has the assurance from Nathan that, yeah, this was coming. So David is not caught off guard. He could go, yep, this is what happens. And then he can just rest in the Lord to go, yeah, I'm bearing the consequences of my sin, but I'm no longer that person. I'm just bearing the consequences of what that person did. And that's kind of the weird thing about justification. When God forgives us, we still are bearing the consequences of the sins we did. But we don't have to then live like we're still that guy. We are no longer that person. And that's where David can say, that's why I found especially powerful as we get to Psalm 7. He's going to say, if I have done any of this, I deserve death. And you're like, David, you did. But you've got to keep in mind, it's been forgiven. It's already dealt with. That one. And so actually, David is innocent in God's eyes. And so it's just one of those weird, huh. And that's why he's going to keep saying, the judge, why don't you sit on your throne and judge me? Because we've dealt with this one already. All right. Any other follow-ups or questions or comments? Peter?
I just want to quote a hymn tune that is an object lesson for us all. And I think it would have applied in this situation. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to John the Baptist, because a lot of stuff goes back to John the Baptist these last few weeks. He forgot in the darkness what he knew in the light. He was utterly assured of it. But when things went bad, that's where he got a little wobbly, as it were. So, yeah, don't let the darkness blind you. Julie, did you have something? Oh, yeah, Julie.
I'm thinking that David was fighting the flesh, and the Spirit was trying to encourage him, but he couldn't see it through all the mire and
Yeah.
because it's easier sometimes.
Yeah, it's easier to go with gravity.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's easier to get pulled down by our spirit, which is our spirit gets weighted, our spirit gets heavy, and we just go right down with it. And God's saying, nope, let's get that back up. And I don't think for a moment that David is like, as Shimei's throwing a rock at him, he's like, thou art my portion, Lord. I don't think he's writing this song like as a rock's hitting him in the shoulder. Maybe he was just that. But I think this is where David's pausing and he's feeling the gravity of the situation going, Lord, you're my strength. You're my salvation. You're my shield. And then he writes the song down. And you know, he sits there and he pens 4 Psalms right back to back. I mean, but again, I think you're right. I think he's trying to buoy his spirit to say, no, I cannot give in to this despair. And that, again, that's why I title this, You've Got to Believe the Truth, and you've got to actively reject the lie. Because the lie is going to tell you all this stuff. And he goes, I hear it. I cannot let it get purchased. I've got to reject it. All right? Any final questions or comments? Okay. All right. Peter, could I get you to close us in prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you once again for this great opportunity to spend time in this church and listening to Pastor Mike. And there are object lessons for us all in this. And I hope, Lord, that what we have learned tonight we can take forth and tell others about the great love you have for us all. This I ask through Christ our Lord.